and of course it is and it has some confusing elements, and also of course it's interesting because it is in some aspect like time reversal but some aspect not. So let's start by defining parity. So this is also another example of discrete symmetry. So it turns out the definition of parity is a little bit tricky, and it's not so difficult in 1D and 3D, but it gets tricky in even dimension. So let's define parity. So in 1D, you have also already seen some examples of parity and some parity related theorems, because we have looked at these results for odd and even function and odd and even potential and odd and even wave eigenstates or wave functions. So the simplest definition of parity is it's an operation which takes x to minus x. So that's your parity operation. So x to minus x in 3D or x to minus x in 1D. So that is how it is simply defined in odd dimension. And if I have to write it pictorially, it is basically a reflection at the origin, a point reflection, not a mirror like plane reflection. Okay. So this is, if this is my x, y, and z coordinate, the question I'm asking that what happens if I flip my coordinate, which means this becomes the new y, this becomes the new z, this becomes the new x. So this is like a right-handed coordinate and left-handed coordinate system. What if I measure everything in terms of that coordinate system? That's a passive way of looking at it. Or an active way of looking at it is by saying that everything is inverted, like in the uh, with respect to the origin. So that is how you typically define parity in odd dimension. So even dimension, it's a little different. So and the why it is, so let me just complete the definition, because otherwise you will find why I'm doing these two different things. So you can, we know that you can write a rotation like that. A rotation can be written as cos theta, sin theta, and all that. Similarly, a parity operation can be also written as -1, -1, -1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. So this is the parity matrix. So this acts on a vector. You can imagine if it acts on a vector x, y, z, x, y, and z, it will take it to minus x, minus y, and minus z. And the characteristic property of this, the determinant of P is -1. So this is one critical definition. So now you can imagine that if you just do that much, that is not, the determinant will be +1 and it won't be really the same thing as that. It will be some operation, but it is like a 180-degree rotation. So if I have, for example, this, so notice that this is not really an 180-degree rotation. This is, you can think it as a, first you can think it as a reflection. So if I think this as a mirror plane, if I think this as a mirror plane, so it's a reflection with respect to that plane, first with respect to that plane, and then a 180-degree rotation. So you can think it as a reflection plus rotation, 180 degree. So if you try to do the same thing, you will reach at the following. So this must not go to this. So this is not the same thing. It is a different, it's a 180-degree rotation only. So this equivalent of this is this. So the even dimension, the parity should be defined like that. So if xi are the coordinate where I equal to, I is 1 and 2 in here, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4 in fourth dimension and so on. So it should be defined as x1 going to minus x1, but all other xi's going to xi where I is not equal to 1. So this tricky point one need to remember, but we are not discussing 2D right now, but 2D parity is very interesting problem. And it is usually, again, in condensed matter physics, there are actual 2D systems or close to 2D systems where that needs to be taken to be, normally you don't deal with 2D system in real world, but you can engineer such system as at a interface of two materials. And there that this definition makes a difference, and this needs to be taken care of separately. But in this course, we will confine ourselves in 1D and 2D, and we will see that. So let's see what the classical parity will do. So classical parity will do the following. It will take xp to minus x minus p, obviously because p is mx dot. But now we want to ask what it does to quantum. So that means we have to ask what it does to a quantum mechanical state, and then we have to ask what it does to a quantum mechanical operator. So let's do that. Look at the state. So pi is the parity operator. So it will take this to minus x, which is what we want. Or if it acts on a wave function, it should take it to minus x. So this is, notice that this is a discrete symmetry which you have already seen, and that's because it looks like a, because there is a reflection involved into it. That means you cannot do a continuous small tiny transformation and write it as in a form like this, 1 plus IET with a generator. So there is no such thing. So there is no Lie algebra Lie group structure. Also notice it's quickly easy to check that what are the properties of this pi operator. So this pi operator must have this, which means if you do twice this operation, you will come back to whatever you were, wherever you were. And you can also show that pi square is also equal to 1. So this is equivalent statement actually. And pi equal to pi dagger is pi inverse. So it's a unitary operator. It's not an anti-unitary operator with Hamiltonian like time reversal symmetry. And this follows very easily from the requirement that I want after transformation, so minus xx to have the same overlap, to be the same as plus xx. Both are equal to 1 because both are normalized. I don't want to mess with that, and that obviously comes to this requirement. Gives me this first one, and the second one comes from the fact pi applied twice is equivalent to nothing. Okay, now as I said that we have seen that this parity operator can actually is actually commuting with the Hamiltonian, and we have seen the example of that. It's an operator which commutes with the Hamiltonian, not like time reversal which anti-commutes. And that's why it will, and that you can check very easily from the examples you have seen in quantum mechanics 1. For example, if I take a Hamiltonian which is minus h cut square by 2m del 2 del x2 plus vx, I can check it very easily. So I can apply this h and then pi, then p, and on this psi x, and then p and h on psi x. So just do these two lines of algebra because this, okay, I can also guide you how to do that in case someone is confused. So this is vx. This gives me psi minus x. The parity's job is to flip the sign. This gives me minus h cut square by 2m del 2 del x2 plus v minus x psi minus x. So these two can be equivalent only if vx equal to v minus x. So the one possibility is this. Another possibility is vx is equal to plus minus vx. These are the only two possibilities by which this can be satisfied. But there could be a potential like that. So there could be a potential which is neither of this. There could be a potential which is something like this, arbitrary potential. Then of course this is not true, and then this is neither true. So it is not guaranteed that every Hamiltonian will have parity. So in that sense, it's so the discussion of parity is different. It is a Hamilton, either whether the Hamiltonian has the parity symmetry. That is the first question to be asked, and if it has, how the states carry this signature or carry special properties for this parity. In time reversal, the role of time is different. That is what we asked. We discussed in very detail in previous semester that how time is special and how time is different, and that's why you don't have this kind of a scenario there. You are always either time reversal symmetric or time reversal asymmetric. There are only two choice. Here you have this other choice that it is not even symmetric at all, like symmetric or neither asymmetric nor symmetric. Okay.
So here,
Yes.
why would the equation be satisfied for both plus and minus v of minus x?
Okay, let's see. So if my parity operator does this. Mm. Yeah, I don't think it will be satisfied. You're right. But why did I write that? Mm. If I apply the P on psi x, yeah, so we will see this in a moment later, that this P on psi x can act in two different way. Okay, it can either give you a psi minus x, or it can give you minus psi x. So is that a difference? No, that will not even create a difference, because then this psi and this minus will be overall minus, right? Yeah, I don't think it will be satisfied for odd function, so it will be just this.
Sir,
Thanks for correcting.
Sir, I didn't understand that one part. The h of h, and then the parity on psi x will give the Hamiltonian and psi of minus x.
Hmm.
So the parity operator ph psi
So
x.
P is acting on both h and psi, right?
Okay.
Together.
And h and p will act only on psi x.
H only acts on psi, but P acts on both h and psi.
Yes. And hp psi x, the p will act only on psi x.
Yeah, because P is acting on psi x.
Okay.
It is flipping this sign, then H has nothing to do with that flipping sign.
Okay.
Yeah, you are right. So this has to be this. So only if the wave function is parity even, then only this commutes with the Hamiltonian. Okay, so now we will go on to see how it affects. So this is how it affects the states. Just discuss that. Now we want to discuss how it affects the operators. Okay. So pi x, pi dagger. So we want, of course, x. We know that the x goes to minus x under parity. So we also want that to reflect in the position operator. So this must be this. So this means these two guys anti-commute. Sorry, they will. Yeah, they will anti-commute pi and x and pi and p. But we also know from here. So since L is x cos p, L is angular momentum, then we can expect that it must be pi L dagger L. And that means from there we can infer, and I will give you a little better explanation. But from there we can infer that since P and all these angular momentum type operators have the same algebra and same property as L, so we can infer from here that this must be also like this. Okay. Some comment?
Ved is asking what is the difference between pi and p?
P is momentum, pi is parity. Okay, so now we use some weird. Oh yeah. I can see the problem. Yeah, so this parity. Yeah, so the reason of the confusion is this P I used here is for classical parity. So let me use pi for that also. There are sloppy notations everywhere. Any other place I kept the mess? No, I didn't keep the mess anywhere.
In the above, in the Hamiltonian where you tried to show.
Quantum.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we want to show. So we want to check this. So we know that pi r is equal to r pi. So this is again, this could be one need to be careful about. So when I'm writing this pi here, this rotation is the three-dimensional Euler rotation matrix, and this is the -1, -1, -1 matrix. So we know this is to be true classically. We know if I multiply this -1, this is just identity times -1. So this must be true. Now if this is true for all r that belongs to SO3 or O3, then we want this to be true also for the representation of the r. So if I now look at the quantum operator, so that's why I should put a cap to differentiate the quantum and classical. This cap is implied whenever I'm talking about quantum operation. So this must also satisfy, the representation must also satisfy the same property. Okay. So now we know from the Lie algebra that D can be written for infinite, not Lie algebra, I mean not need to use such heavy words, just by the fact that it can be written as infinitesimal with respect to a generator. So this immediately implies that pi j must commute. So that is the simple way to see this, which we inferred anyway because of x and p both are odd, so L must be even. And that we can see a little more formally. So pi j pi dagger must be equal to 0 or equal to j. So this is equivalent to saying pi j pi dagger is equal to j. J or L or any such angular momentum type generator. Okay, now there is a little bit of definition which you must have seen in classical mechanics in different forms, but I am just repeating that. Are you familiar with the concept of pseudo vector and pseudo scalar?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is something you know already. So notice that rotation and parity, the x, how this operator behaves in that way. So that decides whether it's a vector or pseudo vector or something else. So we know that space inversion or parity, x is odd, j is even. So odd and even means if there is a minus sign, which is odd, if it is a plus sign, it's even. So these odd ones are called polar vectors and these ones are called pseudo vectors or axial pseudo vectors. Because you normally expect, these are special things, because you normally expect if you invert your coordinate, your vector will flip, but it doesn't, because they are special kind of vector, their transformation is of special and they have a name, and that is pseudo vector. Similarly, there are objects like pseudo scalar, which you will encounter very thoroughly in the later part of this course. So there one, and so let me just give the example. So p dot x, you will see examples later that there are perturbations in when we will discuss Stark effect and Zeeman effect and all those things. You will see there are terms like this, which is a scalar, and it transforms as p dot x, which is not surprising. This is a typical scalar, because scalar is a number. Whether you flip your coordinate or not, a number should not change. But it turns out there are objects like this, which it is obvious from here because both of them are minus under parity, but this is plus and this is minus. This goes to s dot x. So it's a weird kind of scalar. So they are called pseudo scalar. So this is just a matter of definition. And so on. Similarly, you can show for electric field and magnetic field. So electric field is a regular vector, magnetic field is a pseudo vector, and that's because you can think it as it is generated by a rotating charge. Okay, now let's come to a little more examples, which you are, so these examples are very simple examples because you have seen this in various forms. But okay, before going to the example, let me tell you about a theorem. So there is a theorem about parity, and the theorem states if a Hamiltonian has this symmetry and H has certain En, where En is non-degenerate, then this N is also eigenstate of parity. So this is a very useful result, and I will show you in a moment with an example that why it is useful. But before that, let's see that how it can be proved. And this word non-degenerate is extremely important in this proof. So in order to see that, so let's represent a parity eigenstate. Let's see how a parity eigenstate can be written once you know the N. So let's say I know the N, which is an energy eigenstate. So it turns out that the parity eigenstate can be written like this, which is very easy to check, and I'll show you. I'll leave the check for you, but I'll give you some identities that how to check that. So 1 plus minus pi n. So if you know the energy eigenstate, you multiply it by this. So you get something called a parity eigenstate. And what to check why it is true? How do you know that? You know that if you apply the pi on this guy, on this whole guy, 1 plus minus pi by 2 n, you will get plus minus 1 plus minus pi by 2 n. So this is a check I want you to do, and that tells you that it is a eigenstate of the parity operator which only two possible eigenvalues.
Shouldn't it be minus plus? It will
You are
change
saying
the
plus
plus.
should give the minus and minus should give the plus.
Yeah, it will change the parity, right? From if it is positive, it will reflect to minus, and if it is
Really?
minus, it will be to
So pi
plus.
n will give me. Okay, so let me write down the. So okay, so I have to check that. Maybe I have written it wrongly, but let's see. So okay, so let me mark it. Yeah, I cannot immediately verify it, and I don't think it's. We should spend time on this right now.
Okay, sir.
So this is some property of this operator, which you can use for this, verify this. So first is plus p plus minus 1 square is pi plus minus, pi plus minus pi minus plus is 0, pi plus plus pi minus is 1, which is obvious, and pi plus minus is plus minus pi plus minus. Yeah, so this tells me that pi, this operator, this whole thing is pi plus minus. So yeah, I think it will be plus minus. I think it is right, but you check it and let me know.
So what does the subscript plus minus mean?
Yeah, plus minus subscript means just this plus and minus, just to remind you that.
Okay.
Clear, right? Yeah, it's just a, yeah, just a naming. Okay, so what you have to check that this pi, yeah, somebody is keep their mic on. Okay, so this this guy is the eigenstate of this. What you have to check is this guy is also an eigenstate of this, which you can check very easily. 1 plus minus pi by 2 by n is En by 2, 1 plus minus pi. Okay. So this basically tells you now you are reaching in a situation that you started with the assumption that Hn is equal to En, then you constructed a state which is a parity eigenstate, and then you have to show that if H pi commutes, which is trivially you can show actually, if H pi commutes, obviously you get this. Then because you can flip the pi and H and it will give you this pi and the En will come out. Then this is true. So that means this n and these are same state. So this is only possible if this n and 1 plus minus pi by 2n are same state. So that means this guy can be written as maximum e to the power I phi n. So that's the definition of true states being the same state. And that is basically the, first of all we prove the theorem, and we say, we use critically this condition that it must be non-degenerate, because only if it is non-degenerate you can confidently say that this state and this state are same. If they're not, then there is a linear combination of them that it will be same, and then the whole thing muddles up. Okay, so that is basically our, only if it is non-degenerate, that's where we are using this condition. And we know this theorem to be true because we have seen this in the examples of harmonic oscillator and simple square wave problem, because we know. So let's step back and see what this statement is actually telling you. This statement is telling you if parity is a symmetry of the Hamiltonian. If the Hamiltonian has the parity symmetry, which means we have already established here that the parity symmetry means in simple 1D case is Vx is V minus X. Then the energy eigenstates are parity eigenstates, which we have seen already, because we know in simple harmonic oscillator, the energy eigenstates are either even or odd, either even function or odd function, which means they are either even parity or odd parity, which means they are parity eigenstates. And we have seen these both examples of square wave and simple harmonic oscillator. So this is what I wanted to discuss, but I'm wondering if, since I stated the whole example in one line, whether I should discuss it anyways or not. Okay, let me just write it down, because you have done so many problems and studied it so much. I think this thing will be almost trivial to you. The even function, odd function, and all those things. So we know these two operator, x plus ip by m omega. A dagger is x minus ip by m omega. And we define the whole thing by saying that A0. So the definition of ground state is A0 is 0. And fast excited state is, and any excited state you can get by this. So I'm getting a little casual about the notation because I'm dropping the normalizations. So by applying the A dagger n times, you'll get any arbitrary state. Now we know for this, we can see it trivially, and we can also check it algebraically, that this is pi h 0. So that means, because of this theorem, all energy eigenstates have a definite parity, and that means they are also parity eigenstates. So it's easy to check, because I know the A dagger will not have that. A dagger will be minus A dagger. But we also know that if I apply the pi on n plus 1, it will give me pi. I can write it as pi A dagger n. So this pi A dagger n, and this thing tells me it must be A dagger pi n. So that means if I know the excited state parity, I can know also the next state parity, which is opposite to that. So the states alter in parity, which we know, of course. It's odd even like that. And how do you know what are all the states? You have to just know the parity of the ground state. So we know obviously the parity of the ground state, that is psi 0 x is e to the power minus m omega x square by 2h, which is a even parity state. So I can write this as the quantum number of the state parity. So when I write this, to use a defined notation, this is the problem of notations, running out of symbols. So let me call it pi 0. So when I put this cap, it's for operator. The no cap means the eigenvalue. So this eigenvalue is +1. So because it is parity even, it's even parity. And so similarly, I can write the eigenvalue or the parity eigenvalue of any state, which is -1 to the power n. So that is basically the example of this statement in this theorem in action. Okay, now let me give another example, very trivial example, to emphasize the importance of this degeneracy point here. That why this fact, I have used the fact in this proving the theorem that this En must be non-degenerate. So let's do a very simple example where this thing is degenerate, and that will affect immediately. You will see the impact of that. So let's take even a simpler system, that is a free particle in space. H is equal to p square m. So that's a free particle. So you can immediately see the thing about this problem, because the momentum eigenstates are its energy eigenstates because of this structure, because there is no v term. But momentum eigenstates we know are not parity eigenstates, because this gives you minus p prime, and that is because of the degeneracy. So, and the degeneracy are that p and minus p, these two states have the same energy eigenvalue. So that is why because of this degeneracy, they need not be the same as pi. This same eigenstate need not be also the eigenstate of pi operator or the parity operator, but you can always construct a parity eigenstate. So here is I construct a parity eigenstate. So that is given by p plus minus minus p prime. So I can take a linear combination and construct a parity eigenstate, and that is also something we have learned in last semester, that if I have two commuting operator, one of them is degenerate, then there will be a problem, and you can always construct their common eigenstate by taking a linear combination. So we know this. Again, this statement, this construction is, again, this thing is all you know already from previous semester. I am just looking at it from a different lens of parity, and just to appreciate more that why these results have to do with parity. So we know if I take the typical wave function, that is neither parity or nor parity even. So that means x is plus minus p prime over I p prime dot x prime by h bar. But if I take this guy, this is either odd or even, very clearly. So that's how you can construct the parity eigenbasis or the parity basis. And if you choose, you can work with that, and that depends on your problem. So this is cos p prime x prime by h, and the other one is so this is sine. So you know obviously cos is even in parity, and this is odd in parity. Okay, and they are definite parities. Okay. So now I will do one more example. So this is now a little, this is also a very simple example. This is also something you have done many times in various different form in last semester, and but again we'll revisit this in from the parity angle. So we will do the example of symmetric double well potential. So you have done a prototype of this problem in various form, you even in exam I gave a problem like that, which is not exactly a double well, but dividing a oscillator into two halves and dividing a square well in two halves. So what is a symmetric double well? I have a potential like that. I have a potential. So this is my origin, x equal to 0. And this has this symmetry Vx minus x. So now I know what are the eigenstates. So lowest eigenstate is this. So this is a symmetric eigenstate. Another possible eigenstate is this. So no need to put it on dot. This is just like this. So you have to stitch this solution in the middle, and that is qualitatively you can draw that this has to be the eigenstate. We know how to do this even without solving. So we know the following, that this double well potential, the symmetric state is of course an eigenstate. Both of them are eigenstates. It's also an eigenstate. And we also know that ES is EA. That we can work out from the node theorem, or we can also check it because we did this problem earlier. We can explicitly solve it. Now also notice one of them is parity odd, another of them is parity even. So one of them is pi is pi a is minus a. Right? So now let's see what happens. So let's construct two more states and try to see the dynamics, and then we'll ask some interesting question about this problem. So let's construct a state which is a superposition of these parity eigenstates. And this is again some neither parity odd nor parity even states. So S plus A so this is neither phi nor H eigenstates. These are two states which I just constructed, and I just constructed this for some exercise purpose, but you'll see they have some interesting character. So we have seen that if I start with a state which is neither a energy eigenstate nor parity, or not, at least not energy eigenstate. So if I start at time t equal to 0, this will oscillate between these two states, which you have seen in the ammonia molecule example in last semester. So at t equal to 0, this is L. We want to ask where it goes at t equal to 0 to t. And we know this will be so you are following everything, right? Everything so far is followable, right? Because there is no, I didn't stop in between and you didn't make any comment. I'm just hoping everything is fine.
Sir, one question. I couldn't
Yeah,
follow
yeah.
the L and R gets.
Yeah, of course. You should ask this when, yeah, you should not wait for till I say.
I was
You should
noting.
make infinite interruptions, by the way. No, don't worry about interrupts. So this is, you didn't understand these states, right? Why did I do this? Is that the point?
Yes, sir. I don't understand.
Yeah, so right now I just constructed two states, which is a superposition of the parity and energy eigenstates. I didn't state any reason. I am just saying I have these two states, and let's say my system starts in one of these states, and I want to see what's the dynamics of the system. This is a typical example problem we have studied in the last semester, right? In exams and everywhere we studied this problem. That I gave you a state which is not a, so if the state is a Hamiltonian eigenstate, then the system will be in that state forever. That's what we call stationary states, right? But if the state is not a Hamiltonian eigenstate, the system will oscillate between this L and R or other states. So that's the exercise we are going to do, and that is why we constructed this system. Of course, there is no guarantee that if you make a state, that state will be the eigenstate of your favorite Hamiltonian. It is an arbitrary state. So most likely in the Hamiltonian, if that state will evolve in time. So that is why we are choosing an arbitrary linear combination. It could be any other combination, but here I am choosing this combination to show you something. Okay.
So what intuition did we use to choose this combination?
Oh, no intuition. It's just any linear combination. It's just a symmetric, nice looking combination.
Achha, okay.
Yeah, it is not a, I could have chosen some other combination, 3/4, 1/4, or some arbitrary. Yeah.
Got it.
So this kind of examples we did in last semester, right? So this is just some combination. Any other questions? I didn't stop in between, so I think it's a good point to. Is anybody lost from the track where we are going? If you have not followed one or two lines of algebra, it is all right. You can work it out. But if you are lost, that what are you doing, why are you doing, and where are you going, then you must stop me. Because this chapter is very simple, and this is based on things you already know, just looking the same thing from a different perspective, from the parity perspective. That is why I'm going a little fast here. Okay, just because I'm taking fast, you should not be hesitant to stop me. You know that, right? You can stop me and ask questions. Okay. So we know that what happens here is dependent on this EA minus ES T by H bar by A. We know the overall phase doesn't matter, only the relative phase matters, and that is how this state will oscillate between these two. So after every period of t equal to this, we have seen in previous semester in the form of Rabai oscillation. We did this example with spin halves, but this is the same. This is a two-level system. All two-level systems are same. So we know the same rule will apply here. So this oscillation period is t, and so if I wait for a time t, the small t, which is t by 2, it will become completely, so even if I started with L, so at t equal to 0 I was L, but if I wait for that much time, it will completely become a R, because it will completely go to the other combination, which is 2 pi times this, so it will become e to the power minus I pi, so it will pick up a minus sign and it will go to R. So it is be totally an R if I wait for that much time, and then if I wait for again t time, it will become a fully L. So the system will oscillate between a L and a R in time. So it will just oscillate back and forth between these two. So this is basically a pure L to pure R. So that is the dynamics of this system, which we have studied earlier. And the frequency of that oscillation will be EA minus ES by H bar. So that is the problem we have studied before. So now I want to ask an interesting question. So let's say I have this state and I make this barrier infinitely long, which means I take it to infinite. This is again, technically this problem you have dealt with, but you have not looked at this aspect. If you remember in exam, there was this question that if I oscillator with an infinite wall, and then I gradually reduce the wall size. Okay. So what happens when you do that? So first of all, notice in this case, so when you do that, this becomes two isolated wells, two isolated infinite wells. And that means these states L and R becomes their eigenstates, which means what are the eigenstate of these two infinite wells? So this is an infinite wall. So this wall is going to infinity, this thing is going to infinity, this thing is going to infinity. So now this L and R are eigenstates. So now this L and R will become this. One case it will become this, and its opposite signs like this and this, they will also become eigenstates. They are the same eigenstates. So that means this L and R are now eigenstates when I have taken the limit b going to infinity in this case. Okay. And their energy gap also disappear because this EA minus ES. So what is this ES and A? So their energy gap will, these two states are basically the same states now because the sign doesn't matter. So this ES minus EA, this will also disappear. By the way, this reminds me one question Prarthana asked me in last semester. So do you know the answer of this question by now? So you asked me this question that I draw sometimes the state like this and sometimes the state like this. How do I know which one should I draw? So you remember you asked me that question, right?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Do you know the answer now?
No.
Yeah, it's the same state because it's a minus sign and you multiply by any del, it doesn't matter, right?
No, it doesn't matter. That is okay.
Del is pi.
But given any random potential the solution you search anywhere, they choose a particular form of always, right?
No, they don't choose a particular form. Both these forms are same because they are the same states. Whether you have a fast peak or and the peak is in the later half, these two states differ by a minus sign, right?
Yes.
So that means they differ by a e to the power I pi phase. But since the states are rays, two states which differ by a phase, they are not different. They are the same thing. So you can draw either. Either is right.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay. So that is why I told you at that point of time, the answer is in the third lecture, fourth lecture, where I said these states are rays. Okay. So that is why also here, so if I look at this state, when I make them take them to infinity, so I can write either this state L, this is completely in this region. So L is basically S plus A, right? So this part disappears. It is completely in this region. So this infinite well will one possible eigenstate is this. This is this. Another possible eigenstate is this. Sorry. What's happening? Another eigenstate is this. This is here and 0 here. But they are same as these eigenstates. Right? Make sense? Make sense to you, Prarthana?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay. And that's because they differ by a phase pi. They are the same thing. It doesn't matter whether you do. That was precisely your question, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, sir.
Okay. So now we will do the. That is actually a good question. It could be a trick question and could be so I took inspiration from this question and I think asked this question to someone in the interviews to see, and I saw people are indeed confused about this. Okay, so now let's take this L, so B going to infinity. What was I doing? Yeah, so then this infinite well problem tells you the system is either here. So the ground state is this, either this or this, both are degenerate. So you will have degenerate ground state, And each of these ground states breaks the symmetry of the Hamiltonian. Okay, breaks the symmetry of the Hamiltonian. Why? Because can you see why it is breaking the symmetry of the Hamiltonian? Because if I have this state here and it is 0 here, that is obviously doesn't have the same x minus x symmetry. And similarly, these states, both of these are ground states, and they are both of them are breaking the symmetry of the Hamiltonian. Can you see this? Do you understand this point?
No, sir. Could you repeat?
Yeah. So see, if I look at these states, so when I have a finite barrier, so the eigenstates of this problem, which is S and A, are also parity eigenstates. Okay, and so that means, and the original Hamiltonian has a parity, and that's nothing special, because the original Hamiltonian has this h pi 0 symmetry. That means because it is Vx is equal to V minus x. So that means the eigenstates of this problem will also have the same symmetry of the original Hamiltonian, which is parity symmetry, right? But if I put an infinite wall, if I take the wall to infinity, then that is no longer true. Why? Because now the state is this or this. So these states doesn't have the same symmetry as the Hamiltonian. That much is clear, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now these states are so that means the Hamiltonian can have ground state, which are, and that is not contradicting any of our earlier theorem. That's because there is a degeneracy now, because the theorem we proved was crucially designed for non-degenerate cases. So that means if you have a highly degenerate ground state, the ground state will break the symmetry of the Hamiltonian. So this example, this phenomena is called spontaneous symmetry breaking, and this is an extremely profound phenomena in nature. There are hundreds of examples of that in nature. One classic example is ferromagnets. For example, we know that in a magnet, if I put the spins, all the spins can be rocket oriented in arbitrary direction. So if I look at the Hamiltonian of, I don't know if you're familiar with this, JSI dot Sj is the Hamiltonian. So you can show that J is the exchange, Si and Sj are the spin. Okay, you are familiar with this because we have done this Hamiltonian in last semester for 2 spins, 3 spins. But I can have infinitely many spins. And if the J is negative, then the Hamiltonian will try to orient them in same direction. Then it will become a ferromagnet. So this is the example of a ferromagnet. Now notice that the Hamiltonian has a rotational symmetry, which means this state is same as this state as far as the Hamiltonian is concerned, and this is same as this state, right? But there is an infinite energy barrier between these states, because if I try to rotate the spins, go from here to here, I have to cross an infinite energy barrier in between. So this system actually have a large number of degenerate ground state. But when you look at one Hamiltonian or one system, all the spins are oriented in a particular direction, which means it is falling in one of these ground states, and it is breaking the symmetry spontaneously. So the Hamiltonian has the symmetry, but the ground state doesn't have that symmetry. So if you appreciate this example for the double well, and even if you don't understand the ferromagnet very well, you will learn it in details in StatMech and condensed matter course or solid state course. But the point I'm trying to make here, this fact that a ground state of a highly degenerate system can break the symmetry of the Hamiltonian spontaneously is not so obvious, but it is very common in nature. And there are many other examples. For example, in Sakurai they mention this example, but you can look it up somewhere else, that like sugar and amino acid, which are like main building blocks of life. So they have these 2 types of molecules, which is R type and L type, which can be understood as this double well. And there is an infinite energy barrier between converting a R type to L type. And if you compute this this oscillation period, that becomes like order of 10 to the power 6 years. So that means if you find a R state, if you find a molecules and something in R state, is likely to remain in that state always, and that is a very common type of another example of spontaneous symmetry breaking. And there are more and more fancy examples of these in when you look at standard model in particle physics or in various complicated examples of condensed matter physics. But the main point is this, that in this already hidden in this double well simple problem, that the ground state of this system breaks the symmetry without doing anything special. It just spontaneously breaks the symmetry of the Hamiltonian and that is a very unusual thing which you normally don't expect, but it can happen when there is this kind of degeneracy. Is it clear? At least the example, even if the side text statement is not clear.
Does it happen only for ground state degeneracy, like in other
Yeah,
state?
it is for ground state. The statement is very interesting for ground state actually, but in higher state it is wait, let me think. In higher state it can happen, but you don't care about it because higher state anyway breaks the degeneracy, right? Because for example, if you see a parity even Hamiltonian like simple harmonic oscillator, a higher state is parity odd, but ground state is always parity even, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so that is why it is but it is neither odd nor even. That can happen? No, I don't think that can happen. So that statement should be, I think it should be like that, but I have to be a little more careful that a higher state is either parity odd or parity even. And yeah, that is the statement indeed. But the ground state is always parity even. And that is why we are
it's just
focusing
surprising
on
because it's an even state which is breaking the symmetry of the Hamiltonian.
Sorry, say that again. Say that statement again.
The surprise is because the state was an even parity state, and
Okay.
that even after that, it's breaking the symmetry of the Hamiltonian. Had it been an odd parity state, that wouldn't be very surprising, right?
No, but this is not a even parity state. This is a state which is which state are you talking about? You are talking
You
about
gave the example of the harmonic oscillator. You said that the ground state is even parity, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. So
that is not breaking anything, right? But by the way, sorry, harmonic oscillator is a bad example because it has no degeneracy. Because this whole example is built on degeneracy, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So you need a degenerate ground state Hamiltonian at least.
Okay.
Yeah. And that is, these examples are very common. Like there is this class, and these are very interesting research problems are there, that you have this. There is things called frustrated magnet, which has macroscopic degeneracy, which means there are like 10 to the power 23 states at same energy at ground state. And when such a degeneracy breaks, and how it breaks, and how you form their linear combination, it's a very profound subject. But you appreciate this statement so far, that and ground state is generally interesting because that's where most of the things happen at low energy. The low energy physics is all about ground state energy. And also, if you understand the ground state, you can understand the excited states much better, right? Because you can build up the excited states from the ground state, and you can predict the excited state. That's why we are interested about the ground state. So the excited state can also, so to be more precise about your question, the excited state can also break spontaneously the symmetry, but that is not so interesting. I mean, that is not immediately so interesting. It might be interesting in some special case. Okay.
Yes, sir. Got it.
Okay. One more thing is selection rule. So I wanted to do the discrete lattice symmetry, but I don't think I'll have time. But let me do it anyway. Let me do the selection rule, which is manageable in the remaining time. So this parity gives you another very important thing called selection rule. This subject is this parity time reversal is such a profound subject. There could be a whole course on that, because this parity violation. So this is one of the major problem in standard model, CP violation. So is Rishabh here? Rishabh, are you here?
Yes, I'm there.
Yeah, do you know about CP violation? I don't know very detail about them. Maybe you can do some informal tutorial for them on CP violation.
Yeah, sir. I just need to brush up on my basics. I could do that.
Okay, maybe you catch up. So the rest of you can talk to Rishabh, and he can tell you a bit about CP violation in particle physics. This is one of the profound thing in standard model, and people were searching for a long time because the experiment didn't make sense, and it look like that parity is violated, then they, so you again you should understand this thing, that we are doing all this formalism based on the fact that we know the Hamiltonian. But where you don't even know the Hamiltonian and you are trying to figure out the Hamiltonian based on experimental evidence, then it's a different kind of beast, a different kind of problem. So that's where you ask the question, is the parity is really a symmetry? Is it spontaneously broken or it is already broken in the Hamiltonian? You don't know these kind of questions. So this is a very interesting subject, and also in condensed matter physics, in especially in the context of disorder and all, a lot can be said based on parity and time reversal alone. So you can say by looking at this symmetry that there are only 10 types of Hamiltonian available when everything is random or disordered, and that has, this is called Altland-Zinbauer classification scheme, and that tells you all the dirty metals, or dirty metals means metal with impurity. Any metal is, no metal is perfect, right? Metals have impurity. All the dirty metals are band insulators. They can be classified in 10 categories based on this CPT symmetry, and that leads to a lot of physics. And as I said, this subject can become a whole course, but I thought I'll do 2 lectures, but even after 3 lectures I'm not done, and I have to, I think, skip the discrete symmetry or something, or keep it for the later part. Anyway, let me talk quickly about the selection rule, and then so selection rule tells you the following. So let's say I have an operator. So I use the sign plus for even and arbitrary operator. So this is O plus. And then I consider, so this is an operator which is even with respect to parity. And it can have, so this is, for example, it could be the J operator. And then there is another operator which is odd with respect to parity. This could be the X or P operator. So the selection rule tells the following. So let me consider 2 states, K and L. Let's look at the first example. So K and L, they are of opposite parity. So opposite parity, which means pi K plus minus K, pi L minus plus L. Okay. So then K O plus L. So they are opposite parity, which means if it is plus minus, this L will be minus plus in that case. So this operator will be K pi. So this operator will be related to the parity transform operator in this way. Since they are opposite, so it must be minus K O plus L. So if I start with K O plus L and reach in minus K O plus L, the only way it can happen if this is 0. So that means there is no matrix element which connect, there is no matrix element which connects these 2 states, K and L. So that is the first statement. The second statement is about this second class of operator. So let me take this M and N of same parity. Let me take these 2 states M and N which are of same parity. Same parity means they must satisfy these plus minus, not plus minus minus plus. So for them I can show that M O minus N must be equal to 0. So what does it mean? So this gives me a rule. So that tells me that the matrix element, this is a very simple rule but have a very serious implication in spectroscopy and chemistry. So the matrix element, and also in condensed matter there is something called orthogonality catastrophe and all, of an even operator, parity even operator, is 0 between states of opposite parity. And it is odd between states of same parity. So that means if I want to calculate a transition between these 2 states, which will calculate a lot in the perturbation theory and other context, or in spectroscopy, this is a common type of transition. That transition will have probability 0, which means experimentally we'll see only if the matrix if the operator is even, so you are trying to find an even operator, measuring an even operator, then you will see that that kind of it will connect, or transition will happen only between states of same parity, and similarly for odd operator it will be only between states of opposite parity. So people didn't understand it at first, so people found this thing from empirically. They observed and tried to fit their data, and they found this was called Laplace's rule, and it has different name in different contexts. So people found this in different quantum mechanical experiment and gave different names. And then it was, I think, Wigner who found it for who showed that it is indeed coming from parity, and all these different phenomena are basically the same thing. So that is all I wanted to say, and that is basically it. The class is over, but there is another very interesting thing which I didn't get even time to touch. That is the case of lattice symmetry. So I think I will make a pre-recorded, and or either leave it for one of these buffer lectures which we have at the end for extra special topics. I think I'll keep it for that, and by then you will learn about it in the solid state physics a bit, so it will be easier for you to follow. Okay, that's all. So you might receive some assignment problems this week. Hopefully I'll make some.
I had a question from time reversal.
Okay.
So why do we not define time reversal as just time evolution with minus t?
We do, right? Time reversal, we flip the time sign t, right?
No, but in the operator form, it's not like we just substitute minus t for the time evolution to call it time reversal.
That is how we did, no? That we substituted, we flip the operator will do the following, that it will take all the t's to minus t. So if I look at the simple Schrodinger equation, it will, what I have to do is flip the t to minus t, and then there we learn that when we do that, we have to also take the psi to be complex conjugate if you want the flip t Schrodinger equation to follow the same structure of Schrodinger equation.
Yeah.
I'm probably not following the. I don't think what you are asking is that so simple. I'm probably misunderstanding it.
I mean, I only asked if like the operator form of time reversal is.
Yeah, the operator form is for, so now we want to act it on the state. So it will act it on the state with the criteria that it will keep the physics invariant, which means the Schrodinger equation is invariant, the commutation relations are invariant, and the measurable expectation values are invariant. So for that, we have to find a representation which acts on the state such that those things are invariant. So that is why when we constructed the representation, then we didn't care about the t minus t, then we found some representation which does that job, right?
Yes.
So that was how we found it.
Yeah.
Are you convinced or you are intimidated?
I think I have to frame my question, but I'll ask next time because I'll read up.
Okay, maybe you write down in the Piazza or something.
Yeah, probably.
Because I don't think you are asking such a naive question. So you must be saying something which I am not following.
It's slightly different. I'll frame it better and ask next time.
Yeah.
Also, were you able to figure out how to upload the boardwork? Because you
Yeah, so I think I'll put it in the Google Drive because that's the only option now.
Okay, in the classroom or?
I think, yeah, classroom.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. More questions? If not, we can close the session.
So I think
Yeah.
Akanksha has left. Maybe she had a doubt.
Oh, sorry.
when-
Oh, Akamsha. Okay.
Yeah. So when we derived we talked about gauge symmetry for Schrodinger equation. We said that local gauge symmetry works only if you have an electromagnetic field. So in that thing, we said initially magnetic field is off. We took the wave function, and then we turned on the magnetic field, and then we have a different wave function, and we related both of them with an e to the power ig factor. Was it something like this, right?
E to the power I. Okay, let me open the my notes. or the boardwork. So it was in, I think, second lecture or first lecture. It was first lecture. Yeah, so can you say the statement again?
No, she was just saying that when you don't have the magnetic field, your
Hmm.
Hamiltonian is different. When you have the magnetic field, it is a different Hamiltonian. Then
Mhm.
is it like, are you connecting the wave function of these two conditions having different Hamiltonians? Like when you wrote psi prime equal to e to the power I alpha psi.
Hmm.
Okay. So what psi prime and psi? So psi was when there was no magnetic field, and psi prime is when there is a
Oh,
magnetic
okay.
field.
I think I understand the question now. So the same psi. So if I turn on a magnetic field, then I want to find the solution of that Schrodinger equation, and that solution is related to the old solution by a factor e to the power a local phase factor. So that is the statement. So this new Schrodinger equation that is related to the old the solution of the new Schrodinger equation is related to the solution of the old Schrodinger equation if I put a factor of local phase in the wave function. So that is the statement. They are not the
Okay.
same equation, so they have different solution, but you can connect these solutions.
Okay, so there is nothing weird about connecting the solution of two different Hamiltonians. Like,
No,
yeah.
but this there is no there is not. But I am just trying to say that this new Hamiltonian, so this phase factor which appears in the Hamiltonian, that plays the same role as the gauge factor or the gauge term in the magnetic field and the phi. So that is what I wanted to notice, and that has a profound impact, of course, because then the gauge field becomes a real object, and that influence your interference experiment and everything. So this alpha is not an arbitrary alpha. It is the same alpha which you use for gauge transformation of A. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so clear. Thank you.
Yeah.
In gauge transformation, we assume that the field are and potential are same. I mean, Hamiltonian is still the same. Uh, and then we work out like for different phi and different a's, we will have the this gauge transformation. But in this question, we already changed the Hamiltonian from some magnetic field to some potential.
So I wrote the Hamiltonian in terms of the entirely in terms of the gauge terms, and
Mm,
basically in terms of the vector potential. And now I'm stating that okay, sorry, I think I probably don't understand the question fully. Can you repeat the question once more?
can you share the screen with the, I mean, the notes?
Yeah.
I,
So let me see. So let me save this one first and find the other one. Yeah, I think this class.
yes. Mm.
Yeah, Schrodinger equation in EM field.
No. This not this one. I mean, AB factor. I was asking about where we put the factor of E exponential of iota g.
Okay, so let me.
Yeah.
Yeah, here. Okay.
Uh, so these two are not related by. I mean, A and V are not related by gauge transformation.
A and B. What is B?
V psi prime when we change the wave function from psi prime.
Yeah,
That
so
are
A
they?
and no. So if you know the solution of the regular Schrodinger equation,
Yes.
so I'm giving a prescription on how will you construct the solution of the. So you don't need to know anything. So the point here is that you don't need to solve this problem again, right? If you know the solution of the problem without A and B, you know
Yes.
the solution of the problem with A and V just by multiplying it with a factor which is this factor.
Okay.
So that's the prescription. Now, what is the question? What I am probably not following the question. Can you rephrase it?
I will ask it next time probably. I mean, I think
No, you can ask. I mean, it's okay. I mean,
I am a little. Can you go a little upward? I mean, uh,
Yeah.
so we assume that the b is equal to 0, and then we were trying to, I think, find out. Uh,
so even if the b is 0, the a is not 0. In the
yes.
where the particle is, the particle is experiencing the a, and
Okay.
that is what matters. That is the point I wanted to emphasize here.
Okay.
That means the wave function talks with the vector potential, and that's very surprising, because the vector potential was something we created for our convenience. We didn't know that it will be the real thing. So here it becomes the real thing, because the particle sees the potential directly, even if it doesn't see the magnetic field. But it can be interpreted in two ways. One way to say is that the wave function is interacting with the particle, with the potential, and that is how the rule is. Or you can say, in quantum mechanics, we know that the particle is here or there. That makes no sense. So the particle is everywhere, and that's why it can see the magnetic field anyways.
Yes. Okay. I think I got it. I was confused. I thought that to Hamiltonian that you write in the next page was different.
Yeah, no. It is the main point is the only thing
I
that
mean,
matters is A and V.
yeah. Okay.
That is the thing which matters, and this is giving you a prescription to find the solution from knowing the solution in the case when A and V are both are 0.
Okay. Yeah. Got it. Right.
Yeah, so that is the point. Okay, good. See you next time.